Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order, 6:30. This is the Committee of the Whole, Administration and Finance for Monday, May the 13th, Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal. I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting. I see we have both of our delegations present and accounted for, so Mr. Walsh is off the hook. He doesn't have to play the lone guitar. And also like to welcome the gentleman from BFL. So both groups will be making a presentation. So next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented, please. Okay, I have a move by Councillor Hunter and seconded by?
Yes.
I'll take Councillor Dillabaugh. Discussion, if any?
No.
Hearing none, motion, those in favor? Motion is carried, thank you. Long agenda tonight. Item number 3 on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Are there any disclosures here this evening? Hearing none, minutes will show there were no disclosures. Item number 4 on the agenda is the business arising from the previous Committee of the Whole. Does anyone have any business arising? Nobody, but I'm going to just bring one item forward. And that's on page 4 of 7. And on page 4 of 7, there was a little bit of talk about the assessment risk at Giant Tiger. This is item number 7C. And so through the CAO to the treasurer, do we have any idea of the date of the appeal or the presentations? Do we have anything known on that count yet?
Go ahead, no.
Sorry, through the chair, there has been no communication thus far as to the set of the time. The application's been made into ARB, but the schedule of events has not been forwarded to all the parties.
Okay, so can you keep us apprised of the timelines there? And as well as the timelines, the process. I'm suspecting that there's a negotiation process prior to an actual appearance before the board.
There is,
Yeah.
for sure.
So if you could just keep us know, will you be involved in those negotiations with Mr. Pueblo and Mr. Simpson?
I can be. I will be kept abreast of all of the disclosure papers. So for each party, the papers that are flowing back and forth from MPAC and from Giant Tiger's representatives, those will be, and from our point of view with Pueblo, through Pueblo, those papers will be, those documentations will be flowed through the township, so I'll be apprised of any of that
Okay.
information.
So I guess what I'm really signaling is that this is something that, as mayor, I don't want to lose track of where it is or how it's moving.
General proceedings usually last between 50 and 62 weeks.
Yes, I know, they're long and
They're a
drawn
long
out.
process.
Okay, and so I didn't hear any other business arising. Anybody? No? If not, then I'm going to move on to delegations and presentations. And I said at the beginning, there are 2 delegations and presentations here this evening. And the first is from Rideau St. Lawrence Distribution. And we have Mr. Walsh and Mr. Gibson here with us. Now, just by way of introduction to the committee members that may not be aware of the functioning of this situation, I'll put it that way, Mr. Walsh is the CAO of Rideau St. Lawrence Distribution. Mr. Gibson is the council appointee to the board of directors of Rideau St. Lawrence Distribution and its associated companies. Now, again, just for further information to the committee members that are new here, the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal owns 11.92% of the shares of Rideau St. Lawrence Distribution. And our ownership, our share ownership, entitles us to a dividend check if and when the board of directors declares a dividend. And it's always interesting because at the annual general meeting in August, Mr. Walsh generally brings forward the check, the dividend check. Now, as well as the fact that we own 11.92% of the shares of the company, our township, the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal, when Rideau St. Lawrence Distribution was being set up, our township provided a loan to Rideau St. Lawrence. And the loan is in the amount of $225,000 that the company owes to the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal. And although there's no specific terms of repayment for the principal of the loan, we do receive an interest check on that loan that comes to the township each year. So with that bit of introduction, I'm hoping that that's got everybody's attention. So, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor Snell. I'll stand up here. Good evening, everybody, members of council and the community advisory people.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, I guess I'm fortunate, maybe everybody knows me around, and I see some new faces to the table. And actually, I haven't seen Mr. Dillabaugh since high school, so.
I won't ask how long ago.
We're dating ourselves, and there's no stories there.
Different kind of challenge.
I have, I think there's a presentation that's been given out to you, a brief presentation, that's about 15 slides. I'm understanding the council's got quite a full agenda tonight. I'll go through it fairly quickly and maybe leave some time at the end for more questions. I'll concentrate more on the Rideau St. Lawrence Township of Edwardsburg, the shareholder company type items, as opposed to our industry as a whole in Ontario. So as Mayor Say pointed out, Rideau St. Lawrence is a municipal type corporation. It was formed in 2000. The provincial government of the day undid or redid the electricity system in Ontario, and there was a requirement there to take the old municipal PUCs and put them into Ontario Business Development, or Ontario Business Corporations in the province, and issue shares and become basically a private company. In our case, owned by 5 different shareholders. We still are fortunate to have a number of the people who were involved in the formation of Rideau St. Lawrence still involved with the company. Mr. Gibson, for example, and myself were both around in 1999 when the negotiations started. The mayor has mentioned that the township is almost a 12% owner. And the primary business of our distribution company are the poles and wires that you see out in front of your homes. We're limited to service areas in the, I'll call them urban communities, but within the former village of Cardinal, Morrisburg, Williamsburg, Iroquois, Westport, the town of Prescott, and the village of Williamsburg, or Westport. We also provide, we have a whole automated metering infrastructure system, which we use for our hydro meters, but we also use for the township's water meters. It's a phenomenal state-of-the-art system that other municipalities we deal with are a bit envious. We do some water and sewer billing also for municipal owners. We ran a few hot water tanks with some fiber optics leases. And we, until very recently, we did a lot of work in the conservation demand management areas. We're governed by a board of directors, and recently the board of directors for the local distribution company, the LDC, which is the bulk of our business, there's been some new guidelines issued by the Ontario Energy Board for governance of that company. The next slide is just a pictorial of the actual ownership structure. Those names will all be familiar to you, except probably the first one, the Canadian Niagara Power Company. When we were formed, 10% of the company was sold to Canadian Niagara Power, which today is called Fortis Ontario, and it's a subsidiary of Fortis Inc., which is a large electric and gas distribution company, and they have a fair bit of generation. You'll see there it's an FTS sticker on the New York and Toronto exchanges. Together, they own 100% of Rideau St. Lawrence Holdings, which is just a holding company, and then the 3 subsidiaries, Rideau St. Lawrence Distribution, which is our poles and wires business, 95% of our business. Our utility business does billing and other services, and Rideau St. Lawrence Services, that's where our fiber optics infrastructure sits. The next slide, just a few quick facts. We purchased more than 110 million kilowatt hours for our customers, distributed it over 150 kilometers of lines through 900 transformers and 1,700 poles. Gross revenue for 2017 was just under $16 million, and our assets are just over $15.5 million. At the end of 2017, we paid out just over $2.9 million in dividends and interest on the promissory notes since inception to our shareholders. And we do it with a staff of 17 people. The next slide is just a pictorial of the provincial electric system, and what I'd like to highlight here is from the, it's number 4 where they say substation, from number 4 to 9, that's the area where our business primarily takes place. The rest of it you'll hear called the grid. Most of it's owned by either Hydro One, or there's a couple other transmission companies in the province. And generation is owned primarily by OPG, or Ontario Power Generation. And again, there's a number of other smaller generators. The next slide, because of time, I'm not going to go through it. This is a bit about what local LDCs, or local distribution companies, do in the province. There's about 70 of us, and in most cases the shareholders are municipalities. There's 1 or 2 private companies, and then of course there's Hydro One, which is somewhere around 40-some% provincially owned. The next slide's interesting. That's an average electricity bill for a residential customer. What I'd like to point out on this is that the distribution portion of the bill, when you get your bill, there's four items on it, and the delivery, the distribution charges are part of the delivery. And so when we bill a customer, our average residential customer, about 20% of that bill is what stays with Rideau St. Lawrence. Everything else is passed along upstream to others. The next slide is just an average residential bill, and it shows you the different categories. The feedback that we've received and the province has received, that the bills can be very confusing, and I think maybe the new government might take a look at trying to simplify the bill. Maybe they haven't said which way they might head, but years ago the bills were fairly simple. But today, the bill that you get today, there's over 30 calculations going on behind the scenes, and some of those there's actually an hourly electricity pricing which the customer doesn't pay, but we have to track, and then we have to claim the variance between what we bill you and what it actually costs. That goes into another pot. It's very complicated. The current focus for Rideau St. Lawrence, beginning this year, we're renewing all our smart metering infrastructure. It was installed, we started installing it in 2008, 2009. So a number of the components of that system have up to a 10-year life, or they need to be re-verified. Meters need to be re-verified after they've been in service for a certain period of time. So that's been that's one of our priorities for this year. Until recently, conservation programming. We had about a $1.5 million budget to deliver conservation and demand management programming, and the province has changed directions on how they want to deliver that these days. So we're now in a caretaker role. We're almost out of that business. And the bulk of our expenditures are focused on system renewal. Just like municipalities, our infrastructure ages, and it's got to be replaced at a certain pace to avoid issues with reliability. The next page is provincial priorities, and I won't read through them, but you'll see a lot of these in the paper. Probably for customer comments or ratepayers comments the council might receive. The bottom bullet there was Bill 112, the NIT ban door-to-door sales of energy. So a few years ago, it's not as prevalent now because of this, but people are going around knocking doors, getting people to sign up on energy contracts that in most cases didn't help the customers, and what we saw, you know, the customers who were signing up tended to be elderly, and a lot of them would have a hard time understanding the complexities of the contracts, and they got them. So after a while, the government said no more. So that's a good thing. The other item is the global adjustment, and that's the third bullet point from the bottom. And that's an item anybody in the commercial or industrial spaces will recognize a global adjustment charge in their bill, and it's probably the biggest issue that the government's going to have to deal with. When I came in tonight, everybody asked me for a check, and I can't give you a check, but what I can do, I didn't want to come empty-handed, but the next slide is, we call it the hidden dividend. And an average residential customer, Rideau St. Lawrence, using 800 kilowatt hours a month. The difference between what they'll pay us and if they were residing in another community, or just in another community, it would be about $168 a year. If they were just over the border, east on number 2 highway or something, or west on number 2 highway, it might be a little bit more than that, because the way Hydro One's rural rates work. So, but for us, what that means is we have about 6,000 customers. So it translates to about $1 million a year that stays in the communities that we service. And for Cardinal Edwardsburg, it's about $155,000 of money that stays in the community. And we think that's a good thing. So there's money, it's just hard to get. In conclusion, though, we're the local distribution company, in this case for the village of Cardinal. We look to work with the communities that we serve. We're here, like utility companies, to provide a long-term, stable return for the shareholders, and to try and keep distribution rates in the lower quartile of the province. Those are really our goals: delivering hydro inexpensively, efficiently, and safely. And I'd be glad. I kind of whipped through this in appreciation for your time, but I'd be glad to take any questions.
Councillor Cameron, thank you very much, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I'd just like to just confirm, under the provincial priorities, the last bullet point regarding the Bill 112. Are those companies still billing people, or have people been able to get out of those contracts?
Yeah, oh yeah, we still have, the number's been decreasing. We'd still have at least 8, but we still have probably 500 contracts active.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Dilba.
Mr. Walsh, that changes in the customer bill global adjustment fair hydro plan. Now, you said that was for commercial?
The fair hydro plan in itself is where the former Liberal government, it was done in 2 steps. And the first one was that until they made a change in January of 2017, they started putting HST on the electric bill. And the first 8% that they saved, the fair hydro plan was meant to give residential customers 25% off the bill. So the first part of it was getting rid of the HST. The other 17% basically came from refinancing items that are related to the global adjustment that drive it. So long-term financial commitments. They liken it to a mortgage. So instead of paying off for assets over 20 years, they lengthen that out to 30 years and reduce the costs so that our children don't pay it. The present government has scrapped the words fair hydro plan, and I think the bill that they introduced on March 21st was something about cleaning up the hydro mess. And they're looking, they have a number of initiatives going on, but they're looking to try and get up to 12% out of the hydro bill doing some other activities. And it's gonna be a tough road, but they're making inroads. So they're looking for efficiencies. I can tell you the electricity market itself has been, the market, the way electricity prices and contracts are settled is like an auction, a 5-minute auction. And they've been working on it now for 2 years. They call it the Market Renewal Project, and there's big money in that to be had if they can become more efficient and get into what they call a day ahead market. And when I say big money, it sounds like a lot. The electricity market is quite big, but you know they're thinking $300 to $500 million a year that they can garner from that. But that's not any. It's moving towards 12%, but that's only 1 or 2% of the market. So,
Thank you.
yeah, the global adjustment itself, Steve, is this myriad of all the renewable contracts are in there. There's the regulated assets of Ontario Power Generation. They're guaranteed a price when they bid in the market. So say it's 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour that they're guaranteed that they bid in. The market clears below that, they still get their 4.5 cents, and that other money we pay. For residents, they blend it in the hourly pricing that just changed on May 1st. So we all get it, but the commercial customers will get a separate line on the bill, and it affects them a lot more because it can really change from month to month.
Thank you.
Other questions around the table here? And just a quick one from me. I hear talk that they're going to curtail the conservation programs. My understanding is, and I don't understand why we would continue the conservation program. Ontario right now at the present time has no shortage of electricity. So what do you hear about curtailment of the conservation programs?
Yeah, March 21st, Pat, they did away with all but 3 of the programs. About 12 programs were cut almost immediately. Like there were still contracts signed, and some of the items that we were allowed to complete was that were up till May 1st. So that was done, and the remaining 3 programs are going to be a centralized delivery now. So that's definitely happened. So they've taken, the dust hasn't settled to see if they're going to save any money on this, but the programming is definitely cut. So we delivered about 5 million kilowatt hours of savings over the last couple of years. For us, what it means is we don't have to enlarge our infrastructure. I mean, that's where the savings are. Ontario does have a bit of a surplus now, but it's what's coming up that is going to be more interesting. The other side of it is that the conservation programs, and we did talk to a number of MPPs about it. We have one business that their business plan included a 20% reduction in kilowatt hours in their energy side, and we through the province have given them probably $180,000, $190,000 in incentives, and they've surpassed their goal. And what that would mean to them would be $7,000 to $8,000
In savings?
in savings. So where the conservation, we may have a lot of, we may have excess generation and capacity in the system today. I would suggest that Eastern Ontario may have more capacity than, say, the GTA area. But this company I'm speaking of, and other companies that we deal with that export stuff to the States or compete with other countries, it helps make them competitive if they can reduce their energy costs, their input costs. Energy has got to be a big input cost.
Any other questions here for Mr. Walsh? Well, Mr. Walshall, thank you, and our representative, Mr. Gibson, for coming here tonight. It's always a good message, and I know you explain it much better than I ever could. And look forward to the annual general meeting. I think it's August sometime.
Yes.
And maybe some other members of council will come to that meeting as well. It's always a lot of good information about how the company actually operates, so.
That'd be great. And you know where we are if you need it.
Yes, and keep up the good work with our water and sewer bills. Now, that's another question. You're talking about replacing a lot of those smart meters that were installed back in 2008, 2009. It's hard to realize that 10 years have gone by and they have to be replaced already. You talking about the actual meters in the houses, the water meters?
What happens with electric meters, and these are electronic, they're solid state, so to
Yeah.
speak, compared to what we used to work with. So when they were first purchased, they have a 10-year seal, that we call the seal period, but 10 years until they have to be re-verified. So we're almost completed our sample verification, so the Measurement Canada will dictate for every 1,000 meters that you have in, they want 250 or a number like that, depends on type of meter. They want 250, and they will choose them at random, and then they test them. And if those pass, they all pass. And we're just over 600 meters tested, and we haven't had one that's failed for that yet.
Oh.
So they'll get a seal extension, Pat, most of them for 8 years, but by that time, that will probably be end of life. I would think there'll be new technology out there. So the collector system, the backbone, we replaced that already. That had about a 10-year life. We did that, and you didn't notice it. We were the way we replaced it, we didn't interrupt our day-to-day operations. So we didn't miss any meter reads at all.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, once again, thanks very much, and appreciate your attendance and your
Thanks for your time.
presentation. And the next topic, which is near and dear to our hearts, insurance. Mr. McMullen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to be here this evening. I think you know my job on a day-to-day basis is to assist your municipal team in managing the insurance program for the township. I work primarily with Deborah, Ms. McKinstry, and Ms. Stubbs, just to make sure the program is, you understand what you've got, and that we make sure we look after you in the event that something goes wrong. I'm accompanied this evening by my colleague, Todd Gagnon. Todd runs claims for Ontario for BFL. So he has a staff of 6 people? Yeah, managing claims for all our clients. A big part of his responsibility is managing our municipal program. So on a day-to-day basis, making sure claims are properly processed and making sure that clients are properly looked after in terms of identification and day-to-day service. I'd like to thank Deborah, Ms. McKinstry, for inviting me here this evening. I'm here this evening to right a wrong. I was here at the first council meeting back in February, and we had a discussion on the overall program, introducing it to the new council. I had made a comment at the time regarding an insurance claim that was ongoing, and I had been led to believe that that claim was going to be defended fully by the insurer, which unfortunately was not the case. It was subsequent to the meeting, I spoke to Todd to get an update on the claim, and was actually advised by Todd that the claim was being settled by the insurer without any further really discussion with the township. The reason, well, I'll let Todd explain it in more detail, but the reason was the feeling that the claim perhaps was going to be difficult to defend, and it was easier for him to make a settlement than it was to keep it going on and incur additional costs. The insurance company at the time, AIG, and all the liability insurance companies have under the insurance policy what's called a right and duty to defend. So they have the right and the duty to defend any claim brought under the policy, and they also have the right to make a settlement based upon their assessment of the cost of the claim. So I'm going to ask Todd, if you don't mind, to talk about this claim in particular, and also Todd's life, as I said, he manages a lot of liability insurance claims for municipalities. So I also want him to give you, as much as he can, an insight into what we see on municipal liability insurance claims. There's quite a few of them, as you can probably appreciate. Todd, save me.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you very much for having us, greatly appreciated. So, as Lawrence alluded to, my job is to oversee the claims department for BFL for Ontario, and one of my primary focuses is overseeing our entire municipal program as it relates to claims. So, we are not the insurance company, we are the insurance brokerage for the township. So, our job is to make sure that we're your advocate in the event of a claim. Any questions, concerns that the municipality may have throughout the course of a claim is essentially mine and my team's responsibility. Started in the municipal world, and I must say, so the township has been with BFL for we're going on our 13th year. In terms of the claims itself, very good track record. I would say on average, less than one claim a year as it relates to the liability section of your policy, which is fantastic. In terms of what Lawrence was saying earlier on righting the wrong, I don't know if I would go much to put Lawrence in that uncomfortable situation. The reality is that sometimes a progression of a claim may change over time. What we see primarily a lot in the municipal world in terms of claims are your slip and fall claims. I mean, we live in Ontario, we live in this part of the province where we're going to see some adverse weather, so therefore we're going to get those losses. Municipalities will be faced with property damage claims from homeowners because of water damage infiltrating to their house. And they may believe that that is the fault of the municipality, right or wrong. We see public officials' errors and omissions liability claims. I speak, to the council members here, where we see those claims materialize as well. So in terms of a claim when it first comes in, you may think that the municipality may have done everything right, and that at the beginning it sounds like this is a claim that your insurance company should be defending. But over the course of a file, when the insurance company does their investigation and gets to speak to municipal staff, understanding the ins and outs of what goes on within the operations, as a life of a file progresses, and sometimes it could take 3 or 4 years depending on the complexity of it, that risk assessment in terms of liability may change. And while 3 years prior you may think you have a great position, that may change. Where the insurance company says, it may cost us $60,000, $70,000 to defend this thing and go all the way through the litigation process and having the great unknown on what may happen if it goes to trial or even pre-trial. So if we can try and make an economic settlement, understanding we do have an exposure, that's probably the best way that insurance companies will go. What needs to be done in those cases, which I don't think happened here, is that communication wasn't properly done through the municipality, which should have. To Lawrence's point, under a policy, the insurance companies do have the right to settle and negotiate any claims, right? But the way things are going now is that even though it is a deductible, because there is a sizable deductible that the municipality has to pay back as part of the insurance program, is that the municipality should be kept apprised of what's going on throughout the life course of a claim. And if there is any liability assessed against the municipality, rather than get a letter after the claim is concluded to say, we've settled, by the way, you owe us X amount of money as your deductible, it wasn't properly communicated as to reason why the settlement was made, and doesn't give you as the municipality the option to sort of look at your risk management practices to see if there's anything that can be done better, right? So we try to work with your insurers in order to make things more transparent towards you, the municipality, so these things don't happen again. Right? So that's where we're at on that front. Is there any questions? I really wanted to really zone in on this claim, but I'm curious if anyone had any questions. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So, I find that a bit tough to swallow. And I've got a briefing note in front of me, I guess it's in the form of a letter, from Mr. McMullen to Ms. McKinstry. And it refers to the fact that the claim is settled, but nowhere do I see how much you paid. So what was the payout on this claim that we want to focus on right now? And, well, first of all, I'd like to get an answer to that question.
Mhm.
What was the payout? And, you know, how old was the claim when it was paid out in terms of months?
So the claim had an all-inclusive settlement of $20,000, okay? And this was, well, you have the date of loss and letter, but just to clarify, this is a November 24th, 2016 loss. And it was settled in 2019.
In May of 2019.
No, this would have happened in March of 2019.
Oh, March of 2019.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so, and so $20,000, I can understand that the insurance company gets it out of their hair, I guess is one way of looking at it. But I guess one of the things that concerns me, and I'm just gonna let the other counselors speak for themselves, one of the things that concerns me, and I know that any time a claim goes to the courts, you subject yourself to the vagaries of the court system. And I also know that the court system always looks to the little guy to make the little guy feel right and make the bad guy pay, the big boy pay. I understand that. But having said that, when claims are settled, and this, I can't say it was settled early if it was 3 years, what I find that it does is that it encourages others to make claims. Because rightly or wrongly, they know they're gonna end up with X. Whether X is a big dollar check or a little dollar check, they're gonna end up with something. And, you know, our staff works very, very hard to mitigate our risk. We've put lots of procedures in place to document what we're doing, how we're doing it, when we're doing it, where we're doing it. And business is business, and I guess you have to settle them and clean your hands and move on. But gosh, I just find that it creates an atmosphere where everybody is prepared to take a shot at us.
I don't, sorry, before I go any further, does anyone else have any comments further?
Maybe I'm alone.
No, I don't disagree with your comments, Mr. Mayor. What I would say, if I can just solely focus on this claim, on this incident first, and then I can speak overall. I would say, given the circumstances, and again, you know, given what was outlined by the insurer and the potential risk that could be faced, right? There ended up being a liability exposure, whether or not, you know, you want to agree with it. So it's, you know, so here we are at the beginning of the litigation stages, all right? And if your insurer feels the need that, look, we've got a liability exposure here, can we try and settle this now, okay? And if we can, great, right? But if not, you know, do we want to expend, do we want to spend, you know, because legal costs, I don't need to tell you, can escalate very quickly. And ultimately, what I look at sometimes as well is I go back to the premiums that the municipalities pay as well, where it's, if we have a liability exposure and the insurer believes we can get rid of this for $20,000, we take in this case for example, but no, we're going to argue this, and we're going to incur another $50,000, $60,000 worth of costs, and we're going to take this to discoveries and mediation and go to pre-trial. And all those costs are incurring, and what that's doing is that that's just escalating the municipality's costs, that when you have to go, and Lawrence has the dubious task of discussing next year's renewal, you know, that's the, you know, I'm strictly claims. I always say, you know what, if the client is not liable, then why are we entertaining paying a claim, right? To your point, I agree with you, it sets a precedent, right? As much as you try and keep it confidential, the reality is that no one keeps anything confidential, and claimants will talk to other claimants, and then they'll advise each other, especially when you live in a smaller municipality. I fully understand that, right? But if there is that exposure, then insurers are better off to try and do that, which I think they did here. The issue is that it wasn't communicated properly to the township, and that's what needs to change, right? Yes, Councilor?
I have one question, sir.
Sure.
You said we had a good track record, 1 a year, which is good. What's that compared to the other municipalities our size?
Great question. I don't know if I have the exact stats to give you, but what I can tell you is that I see the township's name far less than a lot of our other municipalities that we have under our program. I would say that given where you are and given the weathers that you face, an average of less than 1 claim a year for the past 13 years is quite remarkable. And that's not just slip and falls, right? That's a gamut of claims. That's a gamut of everything. So I would tip the hat to the township for the tremendous work, to what Mr. Mayor was saying in terms of the hard work your staff have put in. Unfortunately, this was just one that left a sour taste in people's mouths, and it's sort of how can we learn from this? How can we develop that transparency? And I think that we've developed something. Knock on wood, we don't see any claims, but when and if the next one comes in, there's a way to have those procedures put in place.
Thank you.
Councilor Runner.
I just like a little clarification here, seeing as this is happened in a term that I wasn't on council. What was the actual incident that we were paying out on?
So this was a slip and fall in the corner of Perry and Walker, and where there was a slip and fall that occurred, and a significant injury did take place to this individual, right? So there was a fracture that was sustained. Can't get in too much into specifics of privacy, but you know, there was an objective injury that was sustained.
Okay, and a documented medical history.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So insurance companies, and there was counsel on the other side for this individual, but the insurers will never, your insurance company, or any insurance company for that matter, will never settle a file without medical documentation to support its settlement.
Other questions at this point? No? I think you're free to go on.
Just two last comments, if that's okay. First of all, in response to your question, I think it's public knowledge, the city of Ottawa has a $5 million deductible on their insurance program. So, and they have a complete set of staff that manage slip fall claims on any time, all the claims that are brought against them. So, in the world, I don't know what you see on other municipalities in terms of retentions, but certainly, the Edwardsburg's retention is fairly small. I mean, granted, you're not a huge municipality in the grand scheme of things, but in terms of what do you see with other municipalities in terms of the staff they have strictly managing insurance claims?
I would see for a municipality of your size, the other municipalities that we have along the same size, I would say have the same structure. The deductibles are not very different. The deductibles, I would say, are generally consistent with what the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal has. Do I feel that there is a need to look at increasing the size of the deductible? I might be speaking off key here, but given the limited amount of claims that you've had over a 13-year period with BFL, I don't think that there's any, it warrants any at this point to look at increasing a deductible, Lawrence.
No, I think it's,
What was our deductible on that claim?
10,000.
10. Okay, so net out to the insurance company 10 plus their time,
plus expenses.
plus expenses.
Yeah. So when you look at it that way, I think if you started to see a severe, a higher frequency take place, because it's important to note that the deductible for the municipality is inclusive of expenses. So if there are any, legal costs incurred, or any adjusting costs incurred as a result of a loss, that does fall back to the municipality as well. But you're not seeing the frequency that you would need to start to look at potentially trying to take more of that risk on. It's just not that time, because there are very few losses.
Now, one last question from me.
Sure.
Do we have any other open claims?
You do have one more that's relatively
Small?
relatively small and it's recent. And in fairness, I don't have that in front of me right now, Mr. Mayor, but it's certainly something that we can circle back with.
What kind of a claim?
It's a slip and fall,
Another one?
Yeah, you know where it is.
not at the top of my
Do you know?
head. I will circle back.
I'll come back to you
Yeah.
guys. When Gina's on.
Other questions, gentlemen?
Not here.
Thank you.
It's, I mean, just a quick closing note, there is a chicken and eggs relationship here between claims being brought and the settlement of claims. Unfortunately, we live in a much more litigious society, and you see it, I certainly see it on the buses in Ottawa with all these lawyers advertising that bring me your claims, because you won't have to pay any money, it's all done on a contingency basis, so there's more of an incentive, and of course it comes back to who's got the pockets. Well, government's must have the pockets, right, because they're funded by the taxpayers, so. Yeah, we're seeing, I mean, the quantum of claim settlements is certainly increasing, and there's also more people are more willing, I think, to bring claims than they would have been in the past, so.
Yeah, it's just too bad because the precedent gets set, and as you say, in small towns, people talk, so people become quite,
And then one last thing, if I may, and unfortunately, when you have joint and several liability, is that there might be instances where the township might be named with several other defendants into a claim, and if there's inadequate insurance that someone else has, but the township does, all it takes is 1% that a court finds the township to be liable to pay 100% of the loss. So that's another exposure that is out there. But, knock on wood, we hope we don't have to face that too often, but the reality is that exposure is there.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions?
Winter, so,
yeah,
no surprise, there's one claim.
yeah, so,
Okay, well, thanks very much for coming and speaking to the letter and speaking to the individual claim. And, we understand business is business. You have a better handle on it than we do.
Yeah, you said a lot, yeah.
but thank you very much.
Thanks for your
having
time.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks.
Yeah,
Okay, so now I'm going on to item 6 on the agenda, and item 6A is the community grants and donations, a late request from Spencerville. Now, we have the letter here now from Mr. Burry. I think everybody's had a chance to read the letter, and you can see that what they're basically looking for is an in-kind contribution. Now, we don't have a recommendation to go with this letter, and I don't know how to proceed other than to say, are there any questions before I sort of try to draw some conclusion of this? Are there any questions about the letter itself or the issue?
Oversight.
Just
Another got me.
Simple oversight, there's always
Yeah.
been, so
It's just oversight.
Well, if it's an oversight, and we're all prepared to accept it as an oversight, then what I would look for is someone to put a motion on the floor that Mr. Burry's late request be accommodated within the policy, as a late application within the policy.
I would do that.
Can I have a mover, Councillor Dillabaugh, Councillor Hunter? Do you need a more precise wording?
No.
No? Those in favor?
Right.
Motion is carried. Thank you very much. And so now I'm moving then to 6B, which is Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing Modernization Funding, investing in small and rural municipalities. And I did ask that this letter be brought back in front of us just to remind us about what this is all about. Now, as well, just to bring people a little bit more up to date, I did have the deputy clerk prepare this little briefing note that CAO Brown presented at United Counties on May the 8th at the Joint Services Committee. And what the county staff has been able to do is look a little bit deeper. Somebody's beeping.
I don't know if it's mine.
I don't have that high tech in my little truck, so. I don't have to worry about it.
Sounds like,
Sounds
Say
like-
when
I did have somebody come and get stuff out.
Oh, it's a car horn.
Yes, ma'am.
No, stop.
20 seconds.
Anyway,
Got her.
it was a car.
Kinda sounded like one.
So, just taking a quick look here, county staff has kind of done a quick run through to see what the implication is gonna be at the county level. And so there's 3 or 4 pages here, but I'll just draw your attention to page 4, where the CAO points out what the cost is going to be to the partners. That's the United Counties, Brockville, Prescott, and Gananoque for 2019. And you can see there that the in-year after budget implication is gonna be about 1.7 million in total. And then if you turn to the next page, you'll see what the implication is gonna be for 2020. So at this point, estimated to be about 2.5 million in 2020. So, you know, a lot of that is going to trickle down to the township, even if it's only in the form of United Counties tax increase. We have our own realities to deal with as well as these. So I think the purpose of putting this on the agenda was to give all members of council and our 2 volunteer members an opportunity to put some ideas on the table about things we should be thinking about. And let me say first of all that on May the 1st, the 10 mayors in the United Counties met and just kind of did a brainstorming session, a bunch of ideas as to things we should be looking at. I have that sort of here in a summary form that I can put on the table if anybody's interested. But right now, I'm more interested in giving our council, and this is the first real chance that we've had to have a discussion about this. And so what I'd like to do is just look at the clock, showing 20 after 7, allow about 15 to 20 minutes, just to put ideas on the table, no discussion as to the merits of the ideas, no discussion as to what's right or what's wrong or what's good or what's bad, but just ideas. And to that end, let me also say that last week, myself, the deputy mayor, and the CAO met with the mayor, the CAO, and the deputy mayor of Augusta to see if there were synergies between those 2 entities. And then this morning, the 3 mayors, Prescott, Cardinal, and Augusta, the 3 deputy mayors and the 3 CAOs met as well, just to see if there were synergies that could be arranged at, I'm gonna call it, the South Grenville level. And kind of an interesting discussion for the better part of the morning. So I really feel that now I want to hear from our council, and I know the CAO does, and so does the deputy mayor. So I'm just wondering if anybody would like to start off a little short 15-minute discussion here.
I'd like to start, Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yes, please do.
We have a letter here dating back from March 20th to Mr. Clark's office, and we all have it here. And it says, the Municipality Service Office can offer advice and point to examples that might be helpful. Have we, as a Edwardsburg Cardinal Township, I guess it'd be for you, Deb, have we phoned them and have got contact with them to see if there's any examples they could help us with?
Thank you,
Well,
Councilor
maybe-
Bullabach. No, I just, the minister's letter suggested that the ministry office would be able to offer advice, but the reality of it is that they don't offer advice.
Oh.
And they quite deliberately don't offer advice.
That's quite a letter then, okay.
But having said that, there probably will be resources available through the ministry office, once council has provided me with some direction on what questions should I ask.
Thank you.
Now, Deputy Mayor just made a comment in my ear about the last paragraph of the letter.
Yeah, well, it was the same one Steve's touching, the same 2 that Steve's touching on, like, where, I think for me, it just starts at municipal services office can offer advice and point to examples, but the reality is that's
And
really not the case.
And if I can relay the conversation I had with Ms. Church, who is our municipal advisor, when this letter came out in March, she called and said, so what do you think you're gonna do with the money? Because I'll use that for one of my examples.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so it's up to us. They're leaving it up to us.
Essentially.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor
Yeah.
Hunter?
Before we get into too much of the discussion here, I'd like to know what was discussed among the mayors and
Glad you asked that. So, going back to the counties, I'm gonna start there. Going back to the counties, and all I did was ask the county mayors to put concepts on the table. Let's not get into a discussion of the merits. So here are the concepts that came out at the county level. Road maintenance and winter control, would we do better by integrating snowplow routes, counties and townships? That's from Mayor Burrow. Mayor Peckford, we need a director of planning at the county. Mayor Hogenboom, we need a heavy-duty equipment mechanic at the county who would service all township heavy-duty equipment. Mayor Jones and Mayor Malanka, we should be looking at a county-wide fire service and possibly doing or following through on the community risk assessment that we talked about a couple of years ago. Mayor Scott, we should look to see if our 10 fire departments can standardize all of their operating and consumable supplies. In other words, all buy the same Scott packs, all buy the same hose fittings, etc., and standardize that throughout the township, throughout the county, and would that lead us to any saving? Mayor Jones, we need a county staff person to search and research and file and apply for grant applications. Mayor Smith-Gatke, we need a waste management recycling plan. And we should also look to a county-wide regional library service with a county-wide governance structure. Mayor Burrow, we should expand the county IT department and offer those services to the various townships on a opt-in or opt-out basis. Mayor Hogenboom, we need a non-profit housing corporation to supply more rent-geared-to-income affordable housing. Mayor Malanka, we need to expand the county, we need to expand the capability of the county economic development department. Mayor Haley, we need to find a way to fill the funding gaps created by the province. And that's where the discussion ended, except that at the end of that discussion, the CAO, Andy Brown, presented a paper which was the summary of the various points that had been made when the county CAO met with all the township CAOs. A lot of the same things came up. Now, going to the other side of your question, what happened in our discussion with Augusta and Prescott? Let's just summarize it that way. So there was basically a meeting and a subsequent meeting this morning. And the meeting started out with modernization. How can we work together to modernize some of our service delivery? There was talk about working together on a South Grenville library service. There was talk about working together and trying to find ways to enhance, well, and maybe find savings from a South Grenville fire department service. Maybe with one chief, maybe with one fire prevention officer, sharing services at the South Grenville level rather than at the county level. Now, I'm drawing a blank as to some of the other things before we got into recreation. would you wanna jump in here?
I think the discussion was very broad in the sense that we were just trying to see if there was a willingness to have a discussion and a further, anything further. There was an attempt to possibly define the willingness and what would be on the table for those discussions if we could find some willingness to sit at a table. What would we talk about? What would be on the table? What would be on the table? Somewhat an attempt to define exactly what we were trying to do and how to move forward doing that, and then bringing it back to our respective councils to see their thoughts and their inputs.
And I think it's safe to say that one of the things that we kind of pushed was, can we get all three councils together in some way?
I think one of the things that, and especially listening to your list right now, I made a couple of notes listening to your list, and I think this came up today in the discussion, is we have to decide exactly whether we're trying to save money, because there's two ways of looking at it, at that 4 to 8% that's been discussed. Are we trying to find 4 to 8% in savings, or are we trying to combine our resources to deliver a better service? And I think there were definitely two ways, two completely separate ways of thinking when it came to that. And listening to your mayor group discussion, I just wrote down the first word you said: expand, create, not for profit, expand, and fill in the funding gap. I didn't hear one time in there that it was save dollars. So just going back to that discussion today, and in our discussion, it sort of got away a little bit from, in my take anyways, from that 4 to 8% from our original discussion, and it became about generating revenue and trying to deliver better service versus saving dollars. So it seemed to me that there are definitely two different ways of thinking.
Okay, and if I can just, even though I didn't say anything when I read this report from the mayors were totally focused on, we would only do this if it's gonna save dollars.
Okay.
So that was the overriding thrust behind the discussion at the mayor's table. But that was not the overriding discussion when we met today with Augusta and Prescott.
Okay, so you're talking about the counties?
Yes.
Okay. Now, excuse me, Deputy Mayor, where did the 4 to 8% come in? That's the first time I heard it.
Okay, so that's a good, and I apologize because I've been to so many meetings, I forget what I say at each meeting.
Right.
So, on April the 17th, just shortly after the budget had been released, and I'm gonna say this, and I don't apologize for saying it, all of the pre-hype of the budget and a lot of the after-hype of the budget that the media talked to was designed to focus us over here, where we really didn't understand what was going on over here. So AMO they have a very deep staff, and they spent the 2 or 3 days after the budget was delivered looking into the detail of the budget document. And on April 17th, they circulated this 4 or 5 pager to Deborah McKinstry, and I think Deborah circulated it to all of us, and that's how I got it. But, so to get to the heart of the question, so this is AMO's deeper look at the 2019 provincial budget. And one of the opening paragraphs, the Minister of Finance, Honorable Vic Fedeli, on April the 12th, on a live radio show, said that all provincial ministries were reducing their budgets by 4% and some up to 8% due to administrative efficiencies, including technology use. He stated that he expected municipalities to also find 4% efficiencies. So that's what gets me focused on finding the 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8%. Because that 4 to 5% that we find will offset some of the increases that we're gonna be facing next year, regardless of what we do. And, you know, even if we don't find them, we're just gonna have to tax for them. So that's where I get the concept here, that the intention is to help us, and that was the money that 835,000 that the township got. Is it 835? What is it?
584.
584.
584?
You've been to too many meetings, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I've been to way too many.
Now,
I can tell you
so,
that.
Mr. Mayor, you're saying that the counties want a 48% savings,
No, I didn't say the counties did.
the county mayors, I'm sorry.
No, they weren't. They were focused on finding savings, but they didn't have that 4 to 8% in their mindset.
Okay, and today definitely wasn't a savings.
Well,
Out of the 2 to 3 mayors.
well, I think the discussion, I mean, I read that same paragraph today, and I don't wanna prejudge how much traction it got at the meeting, but let me just put it, there were divergent opinions as to what we were really trying to do. Is that a fair way of describing it?
I think yet again, I will try to keep my mouth closed. Yes, I think that that's fair. Yeah.
Tough meeting today.
Mr. Mayor,
You know,
I think it's, we all know where we're coming from here. They want us to make savings, and as far as I'm concerned, I think there is some savings to be made in working together as South Grenville. But those savings are gonna be made at the cost of some townships diverting programs to other parts of South Grenville. If we're gonna get these savings and be efficient, we can't offer the same program in 4 different areas in the 3 townships. Something's gonna give along the way to get those savings. You can't, we'll take the swimming pools, for example. We can't have a swimming pool in Cardinal, Johnstown, and Prescott all doing the very same thing with half to 60% full classes. None of us want to see it, but the only way you're gonna get savings is someplace that it's amalgamation, and whether it's amalgamation of the townships, what I don't think saves any money, but amalgamation of services might, but there's still gonna be some change in location of where those services are gonna be offered, or you're not gonna gain nothing, so.
in other words, what you're saying, the market's only so big.
There's only so many people out there gonna use it. It's the same sense of we got 2 arenas that are running well now, and and nobody went without ice, so how do you justify building another arena?
I'd like to hear that comment on the recreation, Mr. Mayor. It wasn't
It's
talked
my
about.
township and I want an arena.
And it's gonna have its downside too, of some people are gonna lose their jobs,
Certainly.
Well,
if you do go this route,
well,
in all fairness.
as I said, there was a meeting and there was another meeting. So the first meeting, we tried to be very, very positive and focus on places where we thought we might be able to come to meetings of the mind. The second meeting was focused on arenas. And I think you've all seen the one-pager that I prepared as to what our net costs are for, I mean, our loss, no, I won't put it that way. The cost to our taxpayers in 2018 and 2018 and 2017 is measurable, and we measured it. $400 and some thousand on each side. Can't remember the exact numbers. And I think that we very clearly, and I put that piece of paper on the table. Now, I was a little bit disappointed that that information hadn't been shared prior to this meeting today. It hadn't been. But I think when we tried to introduce the concept, Deputy Mayor Deschamps tried to introduce the concept that, you know, is there something else we could be doing instead of rushing to an August deadline with a certain concept in our mind of replacing an arena. Is there something else that we could be doing on a larger scale, on a regional basis, where we would all work together? That was the concept that he was trying to get on the table, and unfortunately, he was interrupted. And he never really got that concept out on the table, but I think the reason that that concept didn't get on the table was because it really wasn't the focus of the discussion, and nobody wanted to get refocused. So, to be blunt about where we're gonna be going, I think we left, you know, the meeting with the concept that, oh, and to be in all fairness, the concept was put forward, maybe if we offered a South Grenville-wide recreation service and put everything into the pot, pools, tennis courts, baseball diamonds, arenas, and put everything into the pot, and then shared all expenses, that maybe there would be a reduction for Edwardsburg Cardinal. Because certainly, as we all know right now, Augusta is paying only $15,000 a year. Now, our worry was that it's a bit late to come forward with that kind of a concept when we're being asked to support in a substantive way, read that to mean dollars, we're being asked to support in a substantive financial way an application for a third arena. And I mean, I think that we were pretty clear that we can't find our way clear to do that at this point. At this point, am I fair in saying at this point? And
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question? We've been asked to donate money or asked to participate in this new arena. What are they asking for? Is there a dollar value yet?
I haven't heard one.
From you?
I haven't heard one.
Do they want $1 million from Edwardsburg Cardinal? Do they want $100,000 from Edwardsburg Cardinal?
How did you read the meeting? How did you read the meeting?
Yeah, no, there was no discussion of how many dollars they might be looking for, but I did, we were able to confirm that the possibility of coming on board as a partner without any capital contribution, only a servicing contribution, in other words, management of the new facility might be a possibility. I think the way we left that was, you know, draft an agreement, and we'll take it to our council and see what they say. That was the first time in all the discussions I was privy to that I heard them say potentially there'd be no capital contribution expected from us.
It was, that was a very interesting time in the discussion, because you asked for clarity when that was stated. It was clearly stated that at that time there wasn't going to be any capital ask from us. Basically, it was a signature on an application that they were looking for to try to beef up the application. And if we signed on that at that time there would be no capital ask, just an agreement for operational costs. CAO asked for clarification at that point, and the person who made the point said, yeah, we could definitely consider that option. So I was, for me, I felt a little confused even still, but at that point I had lost my mind twice, and I honestly wasn't hearing everything very, very clearly. So I was trying to make notes as well, but I think what I'm trying to say is it was suggested that there wouldn't be capital cost, just operational, which kind of, I think, took all of us a little bit aback, like a little bit back, for sure. But I mean,
I would think, Mr. Mayor, that when you think of those things, and you say application, you have to think about who's receiving the application, and what is he going to, or the group that receives it, what are they going to envision? If Edwardsburg Cardinal signatures on that list, there's gonna be assumptions made that we're gonna be involved in the creation, financing, funding, or whatever, okay?
Well, actually, it goes a little bit further than that. And I don't think I'm wrong to report what we heard at the table today. That it is quite clear that an application for funding for a third arena is going to require the collaboration of all three neighbors. Not just we support, the collaboration and active financial participation of all three neighbors. And I think the way it was kind of couched was, if the application comes forward with the collaboration of all three neighbors, it would be difficult for the minister to turn it down. On the other hand, if the application comes forward from two of the partners, it may or may not receive support. No commitments.
Did they contribute to any financial money to the building of the Cardinal Arena?
And we made that very clear in a, well, I wouldn't say we made it very clear, but we certainly alluded to it.
Recreation
I
Edwardsburg,
mean,
period.
did we ask and did they offer? I mean, that's another
Well,
issue. but-
no, Councillor Hunter has reported here at the table that when Edwardsburg Cardinal was in the early stages of discussion to replace the Cardinal Arena, that he and the former mayor, Mayor Sloan, made a direct pitch to our neighbors to become involved with a regional type of entity, a location to be determined, and Councillor Hunter reported that. They weren't necessarily tied to Cardinal, and they were looking for they were opened in their minds as to where, and Councillor Hunter also made it clear, and it was reported today, that those overtures or initial discussions were not met with any kind of reception. That was made clear. Am I right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I appreciated the
100%.
fact that you made that public at this table.
So what's good for the goose, is good for the gander. But I might,
And we've made that clear.
yeah,
You know?
I might go back though
Not
to
necessarily,
Minister Clark's letter, okay? And my take on it, just reading the letter and looking at some of the key words. First paragraph, restore trust, transparency, and accountability in Ontario's finances. Last line, become more efficient as well, okay? Further down, third paragraph, more modern, efficient ways of operating is critical in complex work. Efficient, the word efficient is used several times. Efficiencies are obtained by reducing costs, not by spending more money. Okay? So I think it's clear from the provincial's minister's standpoint that the expectation that he wants, or at least the government wants, is to see reduction in cost. Now, how do you do that? First of all, I would suggest we are a township. We should be looking within our own township as to where, if there are any, areas where you can become more efficient. The word efficient, okay? I don't know what those may be. Maybe we need to strike a little task force that begins to do some analysis. We've just completed budget work. You know, it took us 7 meetings. And every year we have variances in our budget. Sometimes they go over, sometimes they're under. Now, the methodologies we're using to do this work and to estimate our finances and so on, there may be areas where we can improve in that by using, you know, modern techniques or a different approach or whatever. But I don't think sitting in an open forum like that, we're gonna necessarily, like this one here, we're gonna necessarily come up with the brilliant, oh, we do this, we'll save this. I think it needs to be down gritty work that gets done by some kind of a subcommittee made up of staff and council, committee members if necessary, etc., and gets into the nuts and bolts of how we're doing our operation week by week, month by month. If we can save, we got a budget of what, between $7 and $8 million, okay? If we could save 5% or 10%, okay, of that budget by simply doing different things administratively, I think that's worth some brownie points, according to Minister Clark's letter. I'm not necessarily, like, bigger isn't always better. Going out to the counties and amalgamating and coordinating and putting stuff together doesn't always result in saving. You're gonna create new inefficiencies that you didn't think of. Okay? Let's say you amalgamate the fire departments. Now you need a dispatch system that's going to, do all that work and so on and so on. That's just in my head. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the kind of issue you get into when you get into this bigger is better idea. And I think those concepts of bigger, better, were all shot down in the 60s and 70s when they tried these mega projects. And half of them failed or never came in on budget or whatever. Okay, so my thrust, at least my view would be, first of all, we look at our internal township. Then, if other townships are doing the same thing, then I think there's room to go up to the next level and say, well, here's what we're doing. Like, I used to do this in the corporate world. If I looked at somebody who was in the similar type of job that I had, department, a district, I had 500 people at one time. And I had the worst district in the company in terms of results. A guy in Montreal had one of the best. I used to go down there every 6-7 weeks, and we'd have a conference for a day or two. What are you doing in this area? Because if I could steal his ideas, or whatever you want to call it, and make my situation better, then I was all for it. So I think the same kind of thing can be done with, different townships within the county. But I think we first have to look at how do we get our own act together.
Well, this is one of the things that after this morning's meeting, and at this morning's meeting, we made it very clear that we feel a necessity to look inward as well, but that we're prepared to talk about sharing as well. Because I think we have to appear to be collaborative with our neighbors. Not only do we have to appear to be collaborative, we have to be collaborative where dollar efficiencies can be achieved. My problem from this morning is that I want to be collaborative where dollar efficiencies can be achieved, but I didn't get the sense that that's where the other two municipalities were. I got the sense that they were more interested in finding ways to make things bigger and better for the residents. And that's not savings and it's not efficiencies. It's looking to the future, it's enhancing quality of life for individuals, but it doesn't address what I see to be the challenge that we've got in front of us with this letter. And I mean, it's been made very clear to me that at some point we will answer for where this 584,000 went. And I want to be able to say, well, we met here, we met here, we met here, we met here, we discussed this, and then, you know what we did? We sat down internally, rolled up our sleeves, got ourselves some outside help, and we went to work internally. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I'll let the deputy mayor and the CAO speak for themselves. I don't wanna go down a road that I'm not supposed to be on.
We did go over that 15 minutes, Mr. Mayor.
And you can call me to order for that, and I'll accept it.
Efficiency.
Lost efficiency.
It's lost efficiency.
Can I just throw one point before we move on? Is that okay? You didn't say it was okay.
Yes, it's okay, by all means, yes.
Oh, if I'm not allowed, I'm not gonna speak.
Are you
I've already been told once today. Again, I think, John, point well taken. For sure, I accept that, yes, we need to look forward. I do believe, though, that staff does a bang-up job with what they do here. Finding 10% in that budget without finding, deep cuts, and 10% is a heck of a lot to cut out of a budget. I think we went through that process.
I'm talking about cuts, I'm talking about revamping.
Okay, let me speak.
systems.
Can I speak though? I didn't interrupt you. For me, I think staff's done a really good job. I do think that we need to look internally. I agree with you, and I do, after hearing what I heard today, think that maybe we need to do that even first. So moving forward, yes, I agree. However, what you didn't say and what has been left out is we are gonna have a downloaded cost to us from the health unit cost to each municipality next year. That, my belief is that's gonna equate to at least 0.5% of our total budget. We will have to do something with our library service. I don't believe that we're going to allow that service to disappear from the way it is, and I believe that that'll end up being a downloaded cost on us as well. And there's going to be the number that's being thrown around. I've heard as much as 50% in our OMPF funding cut. If that's the case for next year, finding 4 to 8% or 10% efficiency is going to be awfully hard without increasing any taxes. So,
Well, a conservative government that downloads costs to the municipalities isn't saving a damn cent. It looks good on the conservative books, but it doesn't save any money. The money gets spent anyway, just in a different spot, out of a different pot, with less taxpayers, frankly, because it's only property owners that pay that. It's not the working public. So
again,
that's the most unconservative policy that this new
Now,
government
we
will
gotta-
ever bring.
We should remember at the table, we're supposed to avoid being parochial. And I know that what we're facing is a parochial matter, but we're not supposed to be parochial. Go ahead, sorry.
so, going forward again and without poking that beast again, from an all-over reduction standpoint, we've been tasked with 500. We're the only, I think, and the way that I look at what the government's done, we're the only municipalities are the only ones that have gotten an increase this year from their budgets. And I do believe that increase is to do their job for them, which is find efficiencies and make those necessary cuts. I think we've been tasked with that job, and I think at some point, quickly, we're going to be, asked, and I think the mayor's alluded to this as well, to show how we have spent that $584 and how exactly that's going to save us going forward. Otherwise, we're gonna have some really difficult decisions come budget time next year.
Okay, so that's round one. I think we need more time and we need specific meetings to deal with this. I'm really convinced that we have to look internally here. And that while we continue to hold these collaborative meetings and attend these collaborative meetings, I think we have to be very, very aware of Councillor Hunter's admonition that the market's only so big. If you close a pool in Cardinal or Johnstown, and to support a pool in Prescott, what have you really accomplished? Well, you can shut down one pool. Is that something we wanna see happen, reduction in our service agreement in our township? Is it something that we wanna see happen? Maybe not. Is it something we may have to face? Maybe so. Those are the hard decisions that I think we're gonna be faced with. Do we really need to support? Well, I mean, a good example came from the public meeting the other night where we were being asked to consider work on a tennis court. You know, do we really need to support tennis court in Cardinal? We haven't spent much money on it recently, it's deteriorating quickly. We haven't spent much money on the one in Johnstown. It needs a lot of work in order to be functional for the purpose for which it was designed. I mean, how do you deal with these things? I mean, would you be the one to say to those people that were here at the meeting the other night, listen, we're not spending any dollars on the tennis court in Johnstown. There's an active tennis group in Prescott. They have 3 great courts. They maintain them to a very high standard. We suggest that your group join the Prescott group and beef up the Prescott Tennis Club. You want to be the one to say that. Those are the tough decisions that we are going to have to make. So I went, thank you very much, calling me to order, way past our 20 minutes. I think we'll move on. But I am going to ask the CAO to see if she can find a time to get us together again on this specific item. And I know it's difficult because there's a lot of demands on our time right now for these various collaborative efforts, but I think we have to continue to be involved. So, moving on to 6C, South Nation Conservation. Here's the same issue coming back to bite us in a different way. And they've lost 50% reduction in the province's financial commitment to supporting natural hazard programs, the cancellation of local student jobs, and the elimination of the province's tree planting program. And please support us and send this letter to the minister. Chair is looking for direction. How do you want to handle this request?
Probably just looking for support with the ministry, however hopeless it is, but I think we should do it.
Well, I kind of agree. I think it's some of the cuts the South Nation can make, I think probably they could find efficiencies in some of their programs. Maybe they don't have as many summer students as they always do have going around, but with all the natural hazards we've been having to whack a 50% funding right in the middle after all the townships are committed. We've already set our budget and stuff, and come in and cut their funding by 50% when they've already set their budget. I think this is, I don't know how you can deal with a situation like coming in after we've got our budget set and come in and say, no, our funding's cut 50%. I'm going to give us half. What would we do?
Well, that's what happens to county.
I know, but I say,
That's what's happened to county.
we should support it and send it.
Even 50%.
At the very least, they should have waited until next year, and that's when the budget was set, and not cut it this year.
50%.
Well, you see, that's because the province's year end is March the 30th. And so they're starting a new fiscal year, and they want these changes to have an immediate effect in their new fiscal year. So, okay, so, and I think Councilor Hunter's just raised a very interesting point. And you know, South Nation provided us with this letter, and you know, to my mind, they missed the most important thing that they do, which is their flood warning forecast. Of all the arguments that they should have made in this letter. So if we have a mind to support this letter and to send these letters as they're asking us to do, I hope that council will give the CAO the latitude to add a paragraph that addresses how valuable it was for us to be getting these updates, these flood watch updates. Because we did use them, we did disseminate them, we did post them on our website, and our public did appreciate getting them. So let's just go quick around the table. How many think that we should be responding in support as they have requested us to do? Once around the table, starting with Councillor Dillabaugh.
I'm good, support it.
Support.
Can I speak?
Yeah,
Whether I agree or disagree? Okay, so I'm open to whatever option that we choose as a council. However, for me, with what we've seen from the last 6 months from this government, or going on 9 months, whatever it is, and what I perceive to be the next year of cuts as well, I think, where do we draw our line? Are we going to, every time the health unit comes to us, the ambulance service comes to us, the school board comes to us, everybody's getting a cut. So we put our pen to paper on this one. Where do we draw the line? Are we going to support them and not the school board? Are we going to support them and not the health unit? Or are we just going to accept that we're all going to take our cut at some point? You know, to me, it's sort of that. And then the other part of me that thinks on this as well is, if we do sign this letter and we do agree that, you know, their funding's been cut 50%, and we do sign for the value and the service that they provide for us, are we then putting ourselves on the line for them to come back and say, hey, you signed this paper for us, we need to make up this funding, we're coming to you to ask for more funding? So for me, looking forward, those are the things that I just think that we're gonna have a lot of asks coming at us, and is this one of the ones that you know, we wanna get behind? That's just my thoughts.
Rest of the way around the table, Councillor Hunter.
I support it.
Mr. Bradley.
I'm in the same mind as the deputy mayor.
Mr. Robertson.
I support it.
Okay, so, and I certainly see where the deputy mayor and Mr. Bradley are coming from, because this could turn into a real torrent. And then how do you pick and choose?
You're setting precedent.
Where are we going to ask for support?
That's the same thing I said.
Do you really think you're gonna get, by sending this letter in, you're gonna get from the other half budget that's been cut?
And I think Mr. Robertson makes a good point too. What is the end result, overall effect of sending this letter?
Absolutely nothing.
As a friend of mine used to say, it has exactly the same effect as when you put your hand into a pail of water and take it out. This leaves the same indentation. Well, on the other hand, South Nation does help us out in a number of ways. And so would you agree that we'll support it and give the CAO the leeway to add a paragraph about flood hazard warning?
Yeah.
Could we get consensus on that? Okay, all right, so we'll do that. Now, here's the other thing. They've asked us to send this letter to 3 different ministers: Yakabuski, Natural Resources and Forestry; Phillips, Environment and Conservation and Parks; and I think there's a third one, isn't there? No, maybe there's just the 2. So do we send it to both places? Do we have consensus that it goes to both places? Okay, all right, so the CAO feel comfortable here?
Yes, thank you.
And I know your point about, we'll have to deal with the other requests as they come. So we'll treat this as a one-off, not as a precedent-setting move.
Sure.
Yes, sure, yeah. Well said, if I could say it that way. All right, I'm on to item number 7, which is the action and information items, and the first item up is the first quarter bylaw report. And we have the briefing note dated May the 13th, submitted by Mr. Buffett, the bylaw enforcement officer. And I see Mr. Lalonde is here to answer any questions about this. So I'll open the floor for discussion. Unless, Mr. Lalonde, you wanted an opportunity to address anything specific to this report.
Nothing specific, Mr. Mayor, unless there was questions on it, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, has anybody got any questions? Mr. Robertson?
On that first page, about halfway down, there's, on the right-hand column, there's a comment made, monitoring North Grenville Part 1. It's under animal, the type of complaint was animal and it was in Spencerville.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, this table was created by John Buffett, so I'm not entirely familiar with what each thing means. However, what I would say that is there's animal control. Part 1 is Part 1 of the Provincial Offences Act, which would be a ticket. So I can only assume at this point that Mr. Buffett has issued a ticket and that that's currently going through the court system.
Okay, and the CAO wants in here.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. Yeah, Spencerville, when we say Spencerville and area, it's entirely possible that this issue is on the border with Mount Grenville, Totemirance Road or Latimer Road.
Okay, Councillor Cameron, you wanted in?
Yes, actually, it's just on the same page under Cardinal Parking. It's got awaiting survey. Can I get some clarification on awaiting survey?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, that one I believe is an issue between neighbors where they're unsure of where property lines are. There's a survey, I think, that was requested or is currently being done to determine where those property lines are, because there was an issue with the neighbors possibly parking on the neighbor's property. So it's ongoing, they're waiting for a survey to determine if there is actually an infraction or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have a question, which is maybe well, I'm gonna jump in here. So there were a number of files opened at the top of the second page marked ongoing complaints. So those are open files that are carrying forward from the previous year end. And then we get to January, new complaints, and there are none. And then we get to February and new complaints, and I see there are a few, and I'm gonna count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, my understanding was that this is 24 hours a week. Is that what we're paying for here? 10 hours a week? So we've got 10 hours a week here, times 4 weeks in a month, 40 hours. So then I look at March, and in March I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I see 12 complaints in March. And 12 complaints in March results in 6 phone calls, 2 emails, 18 site visits, 2 notices, 1 order. And I'm saying, is that 40 hours?
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, the open cases are still being monitored, visited, emailed, phoned. He continues to deal with cases that aren't yet closed. It's not a question of dealing with 12 complaints and starting fresh next month.
Ah, you're right, I've got to take the whole sheet and add the whole sheet up. So how do I know what the current activity is, or the current month's activity is?
I'll just, if I may. We have been working with these reports in an effort to make them more fulsome. If you have some piece of information you'd like to see, you know, would it be of more assistance to you to know that it takes X number of days or weeks from receipt of complaint to resolution? We're trying to find a reporting mechanism that makes sense for everybody. And honestly, Kevin was working on this until Thursday afternoon at 4:30 to try and make a little bit more sense. It's a tough report.
And you know,
he is only just getting his feet wet on this as well.
and you know, and I understand that. And so I guess I'm quite prepared to leave it in his hands as a new employee and new coming into the department. I'm quite prepared to leave it in his hands for the next quarter. And just to say that, from my point of view, I'm always looking for more information, more sort of progress. And one of the things that I want to just reference is the fact that when we issue a Provincial Offences Act, and I think there was some reference to the fact that it results in some revenue. And that is just plain not the fact, because we don't get any revenue until the fine is paid. And, you know, the county really does not have a good enforcement act to collect on tickets. It's very, very weak. And so I'm hoping that we're not counting dollars here before we get them in our hands.
No.
Does the county sort of report to us on a quarterly, monthly,
They have a remittance program.
what's that?
Sorry, they have a remittance program
Mhm.
where they remit the money owed to us, not on a monthly basis. We were told it was gonna be a monthly basis.
Right?
It's kind of here and there.
Okay, now, those remittance reports, do we have a mechanism, do they just send us a check for $5,000, or do they tell us in payment of this ticket, this ticket, this ticket, and this ticket?
Through the chair, it's not by ticket. Usually it identifies a specific individual, so we can't bring these reports to you, and then identifies how much they paid.
Okay, so, this is what I'm finding extremely interesting. Because you're telling me that a report that I get, excuse me, I'll go back a minute, I'll go back a step, and I won't personalize it. You're telling me that a report, a public report that comes out of the public court system advising that this individual paid $300 in fines is something that I can't know. And you know what? If I was sitting in that courtroom that day, I would know that he paid that fine. I would know that the judge ordered it paid. He may not have paid it that day, but all I'm saying is that there has to be a mechanism where we can learn what percentage of our fines are being paid and who's paying them and how many are not being paid. And what are we doing to assist the counties in their collection activities? You don't want to go there.
No, I'm sorry,
Well-
Mr. Mayor, that is clearly a county responsibility.
Yes, I know, but when we issue a ticket to somebody because they haven't, because we've issued them a ticket about their yards bylaw, and they've ignored our ticket, and they have made no attempt to pay it, issue them another one.
Uh-oh.
If they're not gonna pay us 100, they're not gonna pay us 200, issue one for 1,000. They're not gonna pay us 200, and maybe they're not gonna pay us 1,000, so what?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, when you get a ticket, whether it's for parking or clean yards or anything, you have an option on the back of the ticket to plead not guilty and get yourself a court date. Go
Yep.
talk to the judge. If you ignore the ticket, you are guilty in absentia.
Plead guilty.
Right, so, once the ticket's not paid within the due date, that person is guilty of an offense.
Yes,
Then we can take the next step. If we have to go in with our tow truck and haul away their derelict vehicle, we can do that. We have to wait for that guilty plea. As far as the revenue report goes, I agree with you, I think we should know what's the percentage of our POA fines that are actually getting paid. I think that's a really important piece of information. Relatively new to issuing tickets.
yes, I understand. So, you know, we're gonna discuss this more later, but anyway, has anybody else got any questions with this particular report? I know that Mrs. Lalonde is new, and so I'm expecting great things. Great things. Report. Okay, we'll move on to the first quarter building report, and that's a nice one. I really enjoyed reading this one. I especially enjoyed reading the briefing note that went in front of it, where things seem to be getting busier.
Yes.
But even looking at just the first quarter, things seem to be, on a total basis, much more robust than first quarter last year. Now, Mr. Lawon, you're new. You arrived just towards the end of the quarter,
March 25th,
just in time to take credit.
yeah.
Now, do you want to say a little bit about what you're seeing coming across your desk recently?
Well,
That's
what-
the positive side of this.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, so what I can say recently is that it is getting busier. What I'd like to see, or really like to see on this report, is a few more new houses. However, I have been receiving several calls with people asking about what information they have to submit to, to build a new house. So I have been getting those inquiries, but only one application for one semi-detached so far this year. But in terms of the applications, really up until, as I said in the report, up until a period at the end of the quarter, the number of applications was down a bit from previous years. However, just in that last month, we increased, I would say, significantly.
Other questions with this report?
I don't have any questions with the report, just a general question. Now that you're doing the job, you've got your feel of the township, have you had to issue any stop work orders or cease or orders or anything since?
No, nothing like that yet. I think in my entire career as a building official, I think I've issued 2 stop work orders, which is really a last resort. Hopefully you can get the person to work with you a little bit on getting compliance, but yeah, I'm getting my feet wet by diving headfirst into the pool, and certainly not familiar with all areas of the township, but having done a few inspections, so I'd say, well, more than a few, I try and take a little bit of a tour around and detours and see a few areas that I may not drive by every day, but no issues yet.
Everybody's been abiding by the rules.
Everybody's perfectly friendly and everyone plays by the rules so far.
Any other questions before I move on? Well, thank you very much for this report, and, the formatting of this report has taken a long time in development, and I'm hoping that you'll keep using this format. And as well, I appreciate the briefing note as the sort of the cover page.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And so now I'm on to item 7C, which is the third quarter budget variance report. So that's for a whole, it's not a quarter, it's a third of the year. So that takes us to the end of January, February, March, April, right?
Correct.
And some of this things that we're looking at here are not very encouraging, if I can put it that way. So my first question, just so that I'm not reading this report entirely wrong, on page 2, because on the front page, it says, the attached report is a summary of revenue and expenses for the period ending April 30th, 2019, with a comparison to the first third of 2018. So if I go to page 2, and I look at that, it says 2019 budget. Is that a third of the budget?
No, unfortunately, that's the entire year. I have no mechanism within the system to divide up the budget by quarters or by any.
Okay, so under Public Works there, truck repairs, 258,059, that's the year budget for 2019.
Correct.
Of which we've already expended 146,906, or 43%.
43% is remaining in the budget.
43% is remaining of the
We've
budget.
expended 57.
Oh, yes, okay, we've expended 57, and there's 43% remaining.
That's right.
Yes, but 43% is expected to go to 66%, no, What's the number?
Use a third of the budget.
Yeah.
Third of the year, third of the year.
I did ask the treasurer if there's a way to make these percentages expended rather than percentages remaining, but unfortunately our system only will give you this one result,
Is that right? Which is
Yeah.
percentage remaining?
percentage remaining, so we're trying to be consistent with how we express that.
But do the licenses represent a pretty significant amount that distorts that,
Through the chair, the licensing is paid out at the beginning. I wouldn't suggest that it's the largest amount, in terms of what's distorting that. Vehicle repairs are definitely up in this, first third.
So then we look at the next one down, which is fuel. There's an $80,000 budgeted amount, 42,000 spent, or percentage remaining 46%. So do other people, I wish other people would speak here, because I'm just,
We have to remember that the fuel expenses are seasonal. I mean, many of those expenses are seasonal.
Mhm.
Fuel expenses certainly are higher in the winter months when we're plowing than they are in summer.
Mr. Mayor, the question I might have would be, if you look at the public works line, for example, truck repairs,
now, just give me a second to find you.
page 2.
Oh, right where it was? Yes, go ahead.
258,059 was the budget. So my question is, that's the budget for the year. Would the department have estimated cash flows for the year? In other words, would they look at how those $258,000 were going to be spent through the 12 months? Or is it just a bold, big number at the total?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, respond to that. I guess the short answer is, no, we don't do cash flow the way you would in a corporate world. We do know that there are seasonal expenditures, and we do know that some expenditures come in early in the year and then there are no more, for sure. But I can't honestly say that we do cash flow in that manner.
So how do you build a number?
How do we build the 258,000?
Yeah.
Basically, it's an exercise of looking at trending over the last 5 years and looking at
So
what we
it's
know.
the
is
total
coming.
from previous years plus some kind of either up or down or whatever.
I wish it were that simple, but no, it's a,
You're using regression analysis?
that's not a term I'm familiar with, Mr. Bradley.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that municipal accounting and municipal budgeting is quite different from corporate.
Yes, but when you look at the page that's labeled page 3, and you look at vehicle expenses, I don't want to steal your thunder, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead. You brought it to my attention, and I'm glad you did. Well, when you look there, so 2018 year-to-date actuals were 112. And we allocated a budget of 258 for 2019. And here we are a third of the way through the year, we've already spent more than we actually did in 2018.
For the same period, that's correct.
Oh, for the same period? Oh, so the 2018 just represents a third of the year?
Year to date,
Year to date, yes.
yep.
Oh, yeah, year to date, okay, sorry. So, that column will give you, okay, all right.
Is that 34 variance, the 34,000 variance, the purchase of the truck? Or we didn't purchase it straight out?
We haven't purchased that.
We didn't purchase it straight out.
Other comments here?
Yeah, I have one, Mr. Mayor. The cover page is page 1 and 2. And the next page is page 1 of the variance report. And if I look at the line that says taxation and payments in lieu, taxation revenue for the whole year was $5,651,000. And we've received $5,551,000. Significantly up, quite a bit, most of it, as a matter of fact. Don't we have another tax bill that goes out in August?
We do.
So have we got all of the year's most of the year's revenue in the first bill?
No, what's happening here is that the first bill itself collects for all of the levy, for all of the authorities. And then we disperse that money out to the boards on a quarterly basis and to this county on a quarterly basis. So the line item gets coded with the first full levy for the entire, for all four, like all three entities.
It's a
So
revenue
it's not
line.
real money then? Yeah,
It's just billed out, yes.
but it's a revenue, so it's money coming in.
When the system calculates it, it's considered revenue as it's billed, and we do have a receivable line offsetting that. But in this particular report, it's only showing what was billed out.
It's only showing what?
It shows what's calculated, that's been billed out by this point in time through our system, which includes our levy as well as county and school boards. It's a system-generated number. It's coincidental that it's close to the value that's budgeted, but it has no, it's a budget, it's a system-generated revenue.
So
Based on the bill.
when you get down into it, you, like outside of this report, you got the money coming in from the first tax bill.
Correct.
In March.
Yep.
And you, take that from the total here and have a receivable then for the balance that hasn't yet come in.
Correct, we would have a balance sheet which has the
Yeah.
accounts receivable or tax receivable.
So,
This is an
Okay.
income statement.
And payable too.
But we're recognizing revenue that hasn't been billed.
It has been billed.
Oh, I haven't got my last tax bill.
We have billed the first interim bill, and this is the amount of that first interim bill,
Total,
total amount.
not just the municipal portion, but.
Right,
Well, so again, this is representing a third of the year.
What is missing now is
The 2019 budget represents a third of the year.
no,
The
2019
5, 6,
budget
that's
is,
the whole year.
Well, if the line is called 2019 budget,
the total year,
That's the total year.
and then we got 29 year-to-date actual,
right.
we haven't been, I don't understand how we can recognize that as revenue when it hasn't been billed.
It has been billed, that amount has been billed.
How can it be billed? I didn't get my bills. I didn't
Sir,
get my August bill.
No,
If-
your March bill,
The March
The
bill shows the
total of
total,
all-
and then the March bill shows the total. And down a couple of lines below that is the interim amount, right?
So what's
I mean, I don't
missing
have it. I wish I had it.
is the accounts payable to the school and to the county that's included in that.
correct,
Like she's collected the taxes for the school, the county, and our township, and that makes up that large amount.
correct,
So that has to be spun off and paid eventually.
correct.
Can we clarify a little bit and maybe make it simpler? The 2019 budget number you're showing there, is that the total tax dollars, school board and everything included in that? Or is
No, to
that
make
just
it
our tax
more unclear, that is our
It's our
levy,
portion.
Yeah.
our portion of the levy.
So it's just because the system generates all the total taxes?
It generates the entire total taxes. We'll generate another 50% in August, but then we will disperse money out to the school boards and to the counties from that other 50%. I can't make the system,
The
I
school
can't
board
make-
stuff is irrelevant.
I can't make the system do anything but what it's doing, and that's what it's showing
No,
us.
but you can explain what it's doing.
I am
uh,
explaining it.
The,
I take exception to your comments.
the,
Yeah,
the school board stuff is not relevant here. There's only one tax bill, and the tax bill is a composite of the county, the provincial education, and the township. And so what I'm seeing, this 5-6, under the column that's marked 2019 budget, that 5,651,000 represents our entire billing for the year.
correct.
Just for the township.
No, it's everything.
No, that's just the township.
That's
Can't
for,
work.
it is just for the township,
That's just
Mr.
the
Andrews,
township,
correct.
that.
That's just our portion for that.
Whoever wins the total portion is mixed.
Go ahead.
The system's, the 5,651, that's our tax, how
Okay.
much we tax. The other one, because of the system, it's included, including all the total tax bill over there. So
Thank you, you've helped me. I now get,
So it's out.
I'm sorry to be so dense.
It's out by 60% about, so.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry to be so dense, but I understand exactly what you're telling me now. Thank you. I get you. Just, and the treasurer did make the comment, it's just coincident that it's so close.
It is
Yes,
just
okay.
coincidental that it's both.
Sorry. I apologize for being so dense here, and for being a little bit frustrated by the fact that I'm so dense. Okay, so, anybody else got any comments with regard to this sheet?
I just have one question, I don't know where the system generates it to or not, and our total taxes that we build out, how much of a percentage have we got total payment of there? We much outstanding tax or pretty close?
I would say, I don't have that answer for you, Counselor Hunter, unfortunately, right now. But I do know our receivables are coming in better than we have in other years. We have a lot of people on pre-authorized, so
Yeah.
on a monthly basis, we're drawing about $140,000 in each month. So we started collecting in January for 2019, so.
We really can't give a definite answer until actually the end of the year for what's really
No, I can
outstanding.
certainly give a definite answer, I just have to bring a different report,
Yeah.
because it's
No,
a tax
We
receivable
really
report.
don't know, the system's not gonna generate a report until the end of the year when you're getting monthly payments. Because it's gonna show them
Yeah,
outstanding.
yeah, that's the only thing we a date in a report on a one-time date would be basically what we've collected and what we've billed, and then we've got the next billing in August, and then we've got pre-authorized up until that point, so, yeah, it gets a little skewed for sure.
Would you know, general percentage about how many of our taxpayers have went to a monthly system? Quite a few?
I think we're about between 500 and 600 tax accounts that are pre-authorized currently, out of the 3,000, so
Yeah,
maybe just 30 or 40%.
yeah.
I'm surprised
Most-
it's so high.
Most of them would be all residential, there wouldn't be any commercial or much.
Most of them are residential, for sure.
Through the chair. So going down to the total operating and capital expense line, and when we get to the overall percentage at 76.49,
Mhm.
and we're we're a third of the way through the year. So, excuse my ignorance, again, my first full budget on that. Is that good? I mean, to me, that looks, by just straight out number crunching, we should be around the 67% mark, so are we ahead by 8 or 9%, or are we looking good, or is that just gonna shift as the other two
Yeah.
come in and we'll end up at zero? by
What
the time
I'd
we're done?
like you to look up as, instead of at the total operating and capital at 76, you're probably better just to look at total departmental
Yep.
operating expenses at 69.
Yeah, and they're all pretty close, right?
Because the capital, because we haven't really started any of our capital work, that kind of skews the overall number. So, our total departmental is the better number to look at.
So
for-
from a department, if I may, from a departmental standpoint, we're pretty good so far?
Yeah, there are certainly some areas that are suffering from expenditures, which is what I've identified in my, information item, but, for the most part, we're doing really well.
Are there any huge flags, glaring flags, or red lights that we really need to, to zoom in on this that we're missing?
I would say the only biggest one would be our winter control.
Yeah.
Which is at 8%,
Not much left,
that's probably our biggest concern, because, we don't know what we have coming, to us
For the
this coming fall.
What would the normal number after like this time of year be left in that?
Well, if you look at
Like,
last
I mean,
year's.
it varies year to year, right?
Yeah,
Like
if you look at
crazy.
last year's,
But that's
was
low.
134. We didn't have, like in 2018, the first quarter was 134,000, so, I think our biggest, expense in winter control this year has been sand and salt use because of the ice.
Yeah, it's safe to say we're not gonna have a surplus like we had last year coming out
I
of that.
doubt unless we have a lot of supplementary billing that,
Sure. Thank you.
So my question, picking up on Deputy Mayor's point, on that winter control line now, if, and I know we don't get there till October, November, possibly December, but if that line goes, for example, to 280, let's say 283, we don't automatically transfer from that winter control reserve. We allow it to go to 283 and we report it to council as 283.
correct. And we'd get direction if there was a request to use some of that money. I mean, we'd get a better sense by that point in time whether, we're in a deficit situation, whether we want to use any of that reserve to offset any of those costs.
Okay. And what reserve would that be, Public Works, Mel?
It's a specific reserve called winter control. Right
Okay.
now, we have $90,000 in it set aside.
Okay, any other questions with this sheet? Councillor Cameron?
I just have one, and it's for the work in progress, and specifically the Smith Road culvert line. And we've, year-to-date actual of 19,000. I thought on our last disbursement sheet, I saw a $24,000, or a $21,000 charge. Am I wrong?
No, you wouldn't be wrong. The 21 is probably after HST, and this is the net of, we only code the cost plus the non-rebated HST, so that's likely
Thank
the
you.
difference that you're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
And that was pipe purchase, I think, wasn't it?
Culvert purchase.
It was the
I believe.
purchase of the
Culvert
pipe, yeah.
purchase. Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, if there are no other questions, I'm gonna move on from this report. But I take, Mr. Bradley's comment during our earlier discussion, quite to heart. I'm quite sure that we're going to have to be spending more time here and getting a deeper understanding of what we're seeing in these numbers. And we're going to have to spend more time saying to ourselves, how can we avoid this, or change this, or do this a different way? Within these numbers, because this is where our challenge is gonna lie, I'm quite sure. And I think it's gonna come down to, how can we do things differently? Okay, I'm going on now to 7D, which is charitable receipts for vehicles donated to the fire department. There is a recommendation here. We've all seen the briefing note. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, please? I have Mr. Bradley moving, and do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Deschamps seconding. I'm not gonna call for a lot of discussion, because I think it's pretty basic, but is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We refer to $500 for a car as a charitable receipt. That's, to me, that seems like a lot of money for a car, because any car that I've ever had taken to a wrecking yard or whatever, I've only gotten less than $100 for. Or it refers to two situations is the $500 like made up of $250 and $250, or is that just, just one? I just feel $500 is pretty steep. And also too, we refer to in the body, the town, when the vehicle is towed. Now, are we going to be paying towing fees from a location to the fire department? Or is the car going to be delivered to the fire department? That's another thing. And then also, what are we going to do about, let's say we get 8 cars on Saturday, where are we gonna store them all?
Okay, so there's 3 questions here, the quantum of the amount,
Yes.
the towing issue, and the storage issue. So, I'm going to turn to, I'm gonna go in the reverse order, to the Director of Operations. Are we likely to have a storage problem, and if not a storage problem, a storage location?
Through the chair, I would not expect that we would have a storage issue.
Through the chair, if I may, Director of Operations is not a party to this recommendation.
Oh, I kinda caught him unawares, did
Yeah, I
I?
think you kind of did.
My apologies, sir.
If I may, we have no reason to believe that the current arrangement which is with Mr. Martel at the Boneyard won't continue, that he does the towing, the storage, and all of that.
Oh, I see, so that all stays the
As
same.
far as we know. yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Now, the quantum,
The quantum is what CRA will allow, flat out, that's how we got $500, that's what the Canada Revenue Agency will allow for a charitable receipt for it.
they will recognize it.
Yeah.
Now, just to Councillor Cameron, I don't know whether you do your own tax returns, but let me tell you that a charitable donation, a charitable receipt of $500, by the time you go through all the ramifications of filing your tax return, probably will save you about $3.22.
I understand that, but with the comment just made, I understand the Boneyard is going to be getting a charitable receipt, is that correct?
No.
No?
No, the person, the individual who has the, who owns the car gets the charitable receipt. And what Boneyard gets is, when we're done doing whatever we do with it at the fire department, they get the scrap.
They get the scrap. Okay, thank you for that. Now, I'd just like clarification on one item. Some time ago, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, or maybe a couple of months ago, there was a discussion regarding taxable charitable receipts for the library on computers and things like that. Could you please refresh my memory what the outcome of that was?
If an individual donates to the library, we can certainly issue a charitable receipt.
Thank you, that's all I have, so, I'm not looking for any changes to the $500. Thank you.
Okay, good discussion. Motion is on the floor. Any further discussion before I call the question, Deputy
Just
Mayor?
one comment. Having sat through our fire training this past weekend and listened to how renewed importance of their training is and how important education is. I know we watched through one of the outreaches last year, the Jaws of Life and how they work and that sort of thing. Listening to the fire marshal talk about how important education is and prevention of fires, that sort of thing. Anything that people want to donate in any way towards our fire department that they can use, I'm glad to support it. It's great.
And I think that this is a great idea too. It's maybe the extra little icing on the cake that gets the person to say to Mr. Buffett, okay, take it away and bring me my receipt. Yeah.
I thought, I misunderstood it. I thought we were gonna get all these vehicles at the fire hall, and I'm gonna say, gee,
That's
we'll
what I
look like
thought.
Kenny Youthful
Yeah.
in no time, that's what I pictured that. So I'm glad that it's going all the way down. Thanks.
Okay, gonna call the question on the recommendation. Those in favor, please signify.
Aye.
Motion is carried, thank you. And so now I'm on to the 29th, which is 7E, the 2019 tax rates. And the briefing note again comes with a recommendation. And Chair's looking for a mover and a seconder of the recommendation.
So moved.
I have a mover, Councillor Cameron, looking for a seconder, please. Mr. Bradley, and is there any discussion on this recommendation? Hearing none, about to call the question. Those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Motion is carried, thank you. I guess 7 meetings gets us someplace, we don't question all this stuff anymore. And so now I'm on 7F, which is the CRA ruling about council expenses deductions. And I hope you had an opportunity, everyone, to read the letter from the Canada Revenue Agency, which is written in true Canada Revenue Agency style.
This is the battle we had trying to get it provided to us on letterhead.
Oh, I bet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
I bet. So, now I don't think that there's any recommendations here. This is just for individuals' information. But let me just point out one thing to anyone who may be considering using your office expenses as an allowable deduction. You can use your office expenses as an allowable deduction, but then you can't claim expenses against it. And an allowable deduction is just a deduction from total income to get to net income, and you still pay tax on your net income. Now, I draw your attention to the second last paragraph from the bottom of page 1. And I'm looking to council to recognize what I consider to be a helpful suggestion here. Our bylaw 2017-29 establishes rules of eligible expenses of council members and staff for reimbursement. All conference, meeting, seminar expenses such as travel, accommodation, parking, and meals are eligible for reimbursement with supporting receipts. The bylaw does not address reimbursement for other eligible expenses related to the duties of a council member, such as home office expenses, internet, cell phone, office supplies, etc. Which means that when I submit my expense account at the end of the month, I can claim my mileage, but I can't claim the $100 that I paid for printer ink. And I say to you that when I was granted in previous years 1/3 of my honorarium as an expense allowance, I didn't need that to come to me because I had an expense allowance for that. Now I spend $100 on printer ink every 2 months printing stuff, but it's no longer a reimbursable council expense. Food for thought. At some point, I'd like to see us revisit bylaw 2017-29 prior to the next budget year. Not that there isn't enough other things to think about. All right.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
I think to maybe Melanie on this one, if that makes any sense. When I read through that, and maybe I read it wrong or maybe I just misunderstood, but the way that I read it said that really we couldn't claim mileage to and from this job, that it's reasonable to think that we're going to have to drive to work.
Mhm.
Am I wrong in thinking that I read it that way?
No, you were correct in thinking that, yes.
Well, wait a minute, it's not allowable expense under the Tax Act, but we can still claim it as a township expense. Difference between claiming it as an allowable expense on your income tax and claiming it as a reimbursable expense under bylaw 2017-29. It is an allowable expense under 2017-29.
And then we claim it as income at the end of the year.
No, it's an allowable expense. You got your expense paid.
Just a recovery of costs.
It's covering costs. There's no revenue.
No revenue.
No taxes on mileage paid out.
That's right. Or any expense paid.
Any job, you use your car to get paid mileage for it. You can't
It's
claim
not
the
a
expense
taxable
of the car, so
benefit,
you
it's
don't
not a.
claim the
No,
expense of
no.
income of the.
If you had a company car,
Yeah.
that could be a taxable benefit.
Now, what is new is that the whole council honorarium is taxable, is,
Yeah, I get,
is taxable income.
I just struggle a little bit with the way that was written, that's all.
Okay, so I'm moving, if you're answered?
Yep,
Yeah,
no,
I'm
good.
gonna move
Yeah,
on.
there goes my.
Okay, so now, 7G, election compliance report financial statements. And under this election compliance report, we have an interesting recommendation that the amount of $1,100 be transferred from the nomination deposit account to the election reserve account. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, please? Okay, I have Deputy Mayor Deschamps moving, and I have Councillor Cameron seconding. Now, is there any discussion here?
Yes, if I could just ask staff that, how many, the people that have forfeited this amount of money, how many times have they been notified? Just the once, or have we followed up with notifications, hey, you better get it in?
They've been notified several times.
Thank you, that's all I wanted to know.
My question was, how soon can I get rid of the paper?
Yeah.
Pretty soon.
She says right away.
Yeah, pretty soon.
Okay, any further discussion here?
No,
Hearing none, about to call the question, those in favor?
I,
Motion is carried. Thank you. And now I'm on IT progress report, 7H. Nice briefing note here. And before I even start here, I just want to make an introductory remark. CAO brought this to us late in the midterm last term, that we really had to beef up our security. And I think you can see from this report that we got there just in the nick of time. So I don't see any recommendations with this, but I should give the CAO an opportunity to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, it honestly is just an information progress report. We're paying a significant amount more for IT support now than we did 2 years ago. And I thought it important for council to know that we're getting our value for that money. I was more than a little horrified 2 years ago when I realized how vulnerable we are, and I'm much more comfortable human being now.
So, here, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So in the spirit of the modernization discussion, or going back to it maybe a little bit, that, you know, looking at this and seeing a lot of no longer supported with Windows 7 equipment there and moving on into the future, have you thought of this as one area for modernization, and is there a way to get away from some of our vulnerabilities and deliver better service through enhancing and spending some of that money there?
Well, no, but now that you've suggested it, we will certainly take it. In all honesty, I mean, all kidding aside, we have been waiting for council direction on the modernization fund. Certainly as staff, we didn't want to earmark anything even in our heads, as far as that goes. But, you know, I got a real education through this process of having our IT reviewed, because I didn't realize the vulnerabilities are out there just because some people hadn't updated software and those kinds of things. So, you know, certainly if there's efficiencies to be achieved, yes, we should do that. You know, up until very recently, our view was the efficiency is that we're using a 10-year-old laptop. We haven't replaced it yet,
Sure.
but maybe that doesn't work.
Yes.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up. So when, again, back to the spirit of that modernization discussion, do we know what our fellow townships use in terms of software? Do we have compatibility there as far as IT? And if we're going to start replacing things, would it make sense to have some discussion there before we actually go down the route of replacement of that, so that they are a little bit in line?
Okay, so my sense of it is, the short answer is no. There are no efficiencies or compatibilities currently. And the capital investment to make us compatible is probably going to be enormous. Cost benefit analysis, just going by my gut, there probably isn't any. Certainly internally, we need to be compatible, but I don't see any advantage to being compatible externally. You know, and to be totally frank, I think some of our neighbors are where we were 2 years ago.
Fair enough.
And that's where I'd like to pick up on what Deputy Mayor is suggesting. When we compare ourselves to some of our neighbors, I think, number one, we're a much more sophisticated operation from the point of view of the services that we provide, going the whole range. And when we compare ourselves from a technology point of view, I think we're a lot farther down the road of protecting our system than a lot of people. And I'm just wondering, why is that not a legitimate expense for that for some, a few dollars out of that modernization fund to continue to upgrade and protect our technology delivery systems that we use to provide a high level of service to our residents? I think it would be a legitimate expense. I'm glad you brought it up, because we need that system and we need that system protected.
Protection could save us a lot of money in the long run.
And I think it's a justifiable expense of that $500,000. I mean, to take, I'm looking at this sheet with the yellow on it. Am I right in reading this sheet correctly, that everything in the yellow is something that's ending, well, it says ending soon, ending soon, ending soon, ending soon. So we would replace everything in the yellow and say, we modernized our technology system. We brought our system up to, we beefed it up to that extent.
The letter specifically says IT, yes.
And the letter specifically says IT. So would staff be prepared to come back to us with a recommendation that focuses on that point?
Sure, yeah. That makes perfect sense to me.
If I may. So long as we're convinced that in somehow we can justify that through being able to enhance or deliver service more efficiently and more effectively.
Yeah, but it's all part of delivering service more
Yeah.
effectively. Gotta remember, there are some townships within United Counties that don't have anywhere near the same kind of IT systems that we do. Am I right or not?
Yeah.
There are some that are, I'm not saying that they're still using ledgers and paper ledgers, but they're nowhere near as sophisticated as we are.
So one more comment then, just throwing it out there, are we just identifying an area that we can add some value to those other townships that we talked to today in terms of offering them service, whether that's the way that we issue our tax bills and we, issue their tax bills for them, or is there a way that our IT can somehow translate into a savings for them?
It's a hard question to answer right off the
I
top of my
don't
head.
expect one, it's just
But-
more of an idea.
My first instinct tells me it's a big risk.
Yeah.
Because you're then in charge of someone else's data, and if you lose it.
But again,
And we don't have any in-house IT expertise, this is all contractor.
Sure.
rhetorical question. How does a township, a small township, who will remain nameless, issue their tax bills?
And I think they all have some sort of software, some sort of accounting software that allows them to do that.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right, well, I would certainly look forward to seeing a briefing note or a proposal or some sort of a, I'm looking at the sheet that has all of the yellow on it, the things that have to be replaced. and we used some of that money to update our systems, make sure that they were current and that our information was kept secure.
Especially when some of them's the waters in the roads.
Beg pardon?
A lot of them in the yellow, there are waters on the road.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on to 7I, investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Rooney Road, here we go.
Yes.
All right, and so we have a full, look at this proposal in front of us. Now, do we want some discussion here? I noticed that I don't see a recommendation here. Is the staff not recommending that we proceed here? What's going on?
Oh, no, we've already recommended that we proceed, I think. We've got a motion from council that we should proceed. It's really just council has to have a look at this, so here it is. If you have something that you'd like adjusted, or you've got some input on it, by all means, but otherwise, at 8:30 tomorrow morning, we'll be pushing the button.
On this?
Yes.
Okay, so it's ready to go. Now, does anybody wanna have a,
I just have one thing, as I mentioned before, under the, under benefits.
page
Page 104, I guess it is.
104?
Yeah, on part of the, rural Northern Communications.
Yes, towards, more than halfway through. Go ahead,
Fifth page,
Councilor.
just we talk about traffic volumes and stuff, and a little bit about the EDR being secondary road. We don't really mention in there the benefits that it's gonna make County Road number 2 safer, if they can use that because of the turn going through Cardinal and under the CN overpass there that's so narrow and stuff, that this would be a better diversion rather than not putting all the traffic up number 2 highway there. That I wonder if some way we mention that as a benefit in there, that it's.
God, I'd be so concerned that they would say, oh, look, an alternate EDR. I'm not sure we want that to
But
happen.
we don't want that.
Maybe it is an alternate EDR for our township residents. It might be safer for, if they let us build that up to full standards, to be using that as the EDR than putting all the traffic up through Cardinal and Johnstown where all the kids and people are.
Well, even if we don't actually have a second detour route, just the fact that it takes pressure off 2 makes 2 safer.
Yeah.
I think that's your main
Yeah,
point.
that's my point, that it just.
Well, that's just,
Safety option.
that's just a sentence to be added, can
Sure,
that
yeah.
be added?
That's the only thing I had in it, I thought that need to have every little extra nut we could have in there.
Is there any further comment on this application?
I had one. Oh, go
Okay,
ahead.
okay, so,
He was first.
okay,
I just have the one there, and I can't find it here, but I did read it about where we said it wasn't part of the bicycle route. We said no. Would it be better if we said yes? That it- that it-
what's your
that-
page reference?
I have no idea, I can't find it. I just know I read it. Would it be an idea that we could, that it would end up with that bicycle route of Ontario? I'm just throwing something out there.
I don't think it runs a vert from number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's thinking of page 404.
Four,
Through
four.
the- Through the chair, right now, you know, County Road 2 has the waterfront trail, which is an established bike path and services. At this stage, I don't think we can say that it's part of a bicycle route. So,
Oh, how will the project benefit the province-wide cycling network?
exactly.
If the project includes a cycling infrastructure component, a bike lane or a paved shoulder on the roadway, provide a description and attach any supporting information. Can we say that we will that our proposal is to widen the lanes?
No,
Can't?
that skews our entire application. Tomorrow is the deadline.
Oh, I see.
No, that's fine, it just brought me up, so.
Well, but if you go back one line to, or one thing, to 3, will the project result in potential reduction in the frequency or severity of traffic collisions? The increased pavement width will permit motorists to recover from minor errors in steering and tracking lane departures and provides adequate paths for walkers and cyclists. I mean,
So it's there.
read through it, it's actually there.
Yes, but it's not part of the provincial cycling network.
It's not
No.
part of the network,
No.
but it actually says it's wider and it will accommodate walkers and cyclists in the one above it, so.
Okay,
So
Well done, guys.
that was my
No,
comment.
seriously, well done.
Yeah, I read through the whole thing and I thought it was very well put together, so compliments
Thank you.
to the
Very
staff
well
and their
done,
preparation.
okay, so we're all set?
Back now, and if you get the funding, we'll give you a big hug.
We'll say you should have filled in 4 differently.
Yeah. Geez, if you'd only put that in there, we probably would have got the money.
Good job.
No, good job, yeah.
Okay, so now I'm on J, workplace violence and harassment policy. And we have a briefing note in front of us to recommend the adoption of an updated workplace violence and harassment policy. And the briefing note comes with a recommendation on page 2 of 2. Chair's looking for a mover and a seconder. I have Deputy Mayor Deschamps and a seconder, Councillor Dillabaugh. He's not saying anything anymore.
I just have one question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Just a question for staff, and that is on the draft papers that we have here. Is this the new draft, or is this the older?
It's a new one.
It's a new one, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, about to call the question on the recommendation. Those in favor, please signify.
Aye.
Motion is carried. And put that behind us. And so now I'm on item number 8, council inquiries, notices of motion. Does anybody have anything to bring forward there? Nobody?
Mr. Mayor, I had just a comment. I know it's not a township property, but County Road 2, when they did the repaving between Granville Park and the Blair Road, every time they seem to pave, they eliminate some of the places where you can pass. And I found, when I'm driving that highway, that people will pass me on double lines, on curves, on everything else, just to get by.
There's no passing lane.
Yeah, there's
When you
no,
look
there's
at
no
it.
place to pass
No.
between Johnstown and Cardinal.
No, legally there isn't.
That's right, and very little going the other direction too, into Prescott.
And that issue has been raised, and I'm not exactly sure what has happened there, because I can't get a clean read on it, whether it's deliberate or not, but I am told on very reliable sources that the old Highway Traffic Act offense of passing on a double line is not an offense anymore.
No, you can pass on a double line,
It's cautionary, yeah.
as long as there's no opposing traffic.
Well, apparently, there's no offense anymore. Those
Oh, really?
lines are regarded as
Guidelines. over.
guidelines only.
I
How's
just,
that to you,
and so-
Sheriff, when you get hit on?
Yeah, right.
Well, and the point is that the charge of left of center is still a legitimate charge. But passing on a double or passing on a solid is no longer a charge. So I think counties, since it's no longer a charge, it's no longer meaningful, they just run one strip down the middle. I'm pretty sure that that's what's happened.
Yeah.
Is there any further discussion there? Okay, gonna go to item 9 very quickly. And there's a report. I don't have much to report, but I'm gonna report a few things. The Brockville General Hospital is holding their topping off event on Friday, May the 17th. The warden has been asked to talk. I'm gonna concentrate on the fact that the fundraisers have gone directly to county council to raise the money that's required from the general public. And the county council has responded by introducing a 1% of our general levy is going into a reserve to fund hospital capital projects. And so for this particular project, we'll be cash flowing $212,500 a year for 10 years, or on behalf of our citizens in the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, we'll be contributing $2,125,000 to that project. Now, this topping event will take place on Friday at, it's at 12:30 now, time has changed. 3 ministers present: Minister of Health, Minister McNaughton, who's the Minister of Infrastructure, and Minister Clark. And I'm told that either preceding this event or after this event, there's going to be another announcement. One of the things that I have done is just to make sure that our MP was aware that this Rooney Road project was coming forward, and I asked Mr. Jiggins, will our members support this application? Yes, of course. Does this application go through the Honorable Minister McNaughton's desk? Yes, it does. Which means that Minister McNaughton will have a group of projects in front of him. Now, the province has just announced that Minister McNaughton has submitted 49 roads projects to the federal government, and now the federal government must approve them and fund them. This will constitute a second round of applications. And I said, well, how can we lobby this? And the answer was, Minister McNaughton will be in Brockville on Friday, talk to him. So I intend to do that. Now, where it gets us, I don't know. But if it doesn't work, you can blame me. And that lets the staff off the hook. A second thing to just quickly, Councillor Cameron, myself, and the Port General Manager will be going tomorrow to Ottawa. 4 or 5 meetings we have to lobby our application to the National Trade Corridors Fund. There will be a number of meetings on Thursday, which I will probably be involved in, concerning BBL Energy and what they may or may not do to move forward. And lastly, I just want to talk briefly about the seminar that 4 of us attended at the Merck Hall on Saturday, Essentials of Municipal Fire Protection. And just to say that I made an extensive series of notes, and it's, I wanted to thank Chief Moore. Chief Moore provided us all with a copy of the bylaw that we have used to establish and continue a municipal fire department. But after having been through that seminar for 4 or 5 hours, I think we're going to have to turn my notes over to staff and ask staff to take a real serious look at our bylaw. And luckily, in the package that we were working with, there was a very comprehensive one, which eventually I'll turn my book over to the clerk and the CAO and the clerk, the deputy clerk, and they'll have something to work with. But and I know that the staff is up to here, so I'm not asking for immediate attention on this, but I think it's really something that has to be brought up to date. And the other thing I think that we all learned at that seminar was that our mutual aid agreements, I couldn't believe when I asked the fire marshal's office, do you have a template that municipalities can use when they enter into mutual aid agreements with each other? And there are several different kinds of mutual aid agreements, as we learned, which kind of surprised me. But here we are, they've been in business for I don't know how many years, and they really don't have a basic template. Each time there's an agreement between 2 municipalities, they have to go through the legal expertise of putting those agreements into legal form, and we're expected to have the legal documents in place. So that's my report, and I don't wanna belabor any of the points, but kind of an eye-opening seminar. I don't know, any of the other counselors that were in attendance wanna speak to that?
Just to clarify what the mayor said, it was an excellent seminar. We learned things that, well, we learned a lot of things. We saw an actual video of a fire reenacted, and there's an awful lot of things that I didn't know. One of them is that it's now law that you have to have your smoke detector for every bedroom, outside every bedroom. I didn't know that. So I'll be buying more smoke detectors, that's for sure. But very, very informative, and it was extremely well run, and just a lot of great information. If it ever comes again, I'll certainly be there, for sure.
You wanna say anything?
No, I think you people really said a lot. I do have a motion here to close this meeting though.
Well, I think we should give the deputy mayor a chance, before we see that motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor.
No offense over there.
Yeah, I know. Just to touch upon the video and how compelling it is from what I believe the change in the way that we address fire now, from suppression to education first, sort of flipping our threes and ones together, what we deal with first, and making sure that video really hits home on why you have functional fire detectors and CO2 detectors. If there's some way that we could share maybe some of that video or that story on our website, that may help Chief Moore in his quest to get our constituents to comply with theirs. I know the first thing we did when we went home, I'm sure maybe you guys were on the same page, as we went home and did a test on all of the fire alarms, and I found
Yes.
a CO2 detector that didn't have a battery in it. So, which it had been there for a long time. So I switched mine.
And I think the other thing is the tremendous difference. They reenacted a fire. The fire took place in a duplex on this side, and somebody died. They got permission from the owner to reenact the fire on this side. And I can't remember the statistic, but where they used to have something like how many minutes to get to the fire?
The old day when it was suppression first was 27 minutes.
There was 27 minutes that the fire departments had to get to that fire before it reached what they call flashover. With the new materials now that are in effect in these buildings, they now have 3 minutes to get to a fire before it's at flashover point and nobody can get in.
3 minutes and 3 seconds.
3 minutes and 3 seconds now. Anyway, those are just points of information, and I'm going to proceed to the question period. I think there's no audience present. We do have a closed session. I need a mover to go into the closed session. Somebody have the motion to go into the closed session?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dillabaugh that the Committee of the Whole proceed into closed session at, and I can't see the...
9:22.
9:22 p.m. in order to address a matter pertaining to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, specifically by law enforcement. And the next one is acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, specifically minutes of the closed session dated April 8, 2019.
That's the motion to go into the closed session. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Thank you. And 5-minute break.
Seconded by Councillor John Hunter that the closed meeting does now adjourn and the open meeting of the Committee of the Whole does now resume at 9:55.
Those in favor, please signify. Motion is carried, so we're now back in the open session of council. And reporting out from the open session, I have it moved by Councillor Cameron and seconded by Councillor Hunter that the minutes of the closed session held on Monday, April the 8th be approved as circulated. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. And reporting further from the closed session, council met in the closed session to discuss a matter pertaining to a specific and identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and specifically relating to bylaw enforcement, and received a report from the CAO and the bylaw enforcement officer. And now I'm looking for the motion to join the committee of the whole, to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting, and then we'll proceed to the special council meeting. Does someone have the motion to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting?
I do. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Cameron, that the committee of the whole is now adjourned at 9:58 p.m.
And we only have one, okay, so first of all, those in favor of the motion to adjourn the committee of the whole? The motion is carried. Okay, and that meeting stands adjourned.